Hey neighbor, welcome back to Ranked on this pale September day. I promise I haven't forgotten about this show. It can be tough to pull together, but I'm back on the horse with an episode I've been looking forward to making for a long time. Fiona Apple is not only a national treasure, she's a singer-songwriter of the alternative art pop variety. Career jumpstarts came unexpectedly with the acclaimed multi-platinum selling title in 1996, with the most recent cherry on top being the masterful Fetch the Bolt Cutters in 2020, as her total number of albums finally notched upwards to 5. No one does it like Fiona Apple, and you can chalk that up to her nonchalant, ego-free humanity. She's a musical genius who only writes when the inspiration is truly there, which is rare, and she also doesn't buy into the pressures of dropping music on a regular basis. So when Fiona Apple does put her name to something, know that she fucking means it. Everything I'm about to say is purely opinion. We're all biased towards what album we love the most, but this is an artist that doesn't have anything that could ever be mistaken for a bad album. It hasn't happened. I don't think it's going to. So with that in mind, I'm ready to show you my ranking. Please drop a like, subscribe to the channel if you enjoy what you see, and stick around to the end for my reveal of my top 10 favorite Fiona Apple songs.
Be kind to me, or treating me mean. I'll make the most of it, I'm an extraordinary machine.
Bottom of the list or not, Extraordinary Machine is still full of gold. But if I'm gonna put it last, I better justify that placement somehow, so I guess I'd start by saying that this is probably not the full length I'd recommend if someone asked me, hey, where should I get started with getting into Fiona Apple? Fiona's third album proved to be challenging for both her as an artist and her collaborators John Brion and Mike Elizondo. Writing commenced in 2002, which was already 3 years after When the Pawn, and I think this was the tipping point where she just totally lost faith in the music industry and started doing things according to her own calendar, especially after a series of unfortunate leaks set back the recording progress. The album was almost entirely re-recorded, which is no small process for a perfectionist, but against all odds, Extraordinary Machine finally released in late 2005. Part of me holds firm that this album would have been even better if she'd stuck with the amazing Matt Chamberlain as the session drummer, given that he had performed on the leaked demos and her first 2 albums, but I also find it hard to even knock the drumming at all. You see, it's not the drums, it's not the lyrics, it's not the level of inspiration, it's the kinetic energy that feels off. That's really the only way I can explain it. Extraordinary Machine jumps around stylistically, swirling together colors of her early work along with more of a clean break art pop direction. So many of these songs focus on intimacy with expansive arrangements to boot, but they don't always flow in and out of each other all that smoothly. I'm picking at hairs here, obviously. It's not really that much of a seismic issue, but if we're playing fair, I think sharp-witted, smooth-sailing albums is something that Fiona Apple excels at, and this is the only record in her catalog that brings that small problem to mind at all. Without a doubt, this album has classics on it. Oh Sailor was my first exposure to Fiona, and it remains a top favorite. Red 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 uses strings to match a reflective Lost at Sea feeling. Get Him Back is ridiculously clever as she tosses the relationship mind games out the window, and hey, window, that one right there is another one that no one ever seems to talk about. This is the record where her fondness for quirky, abstract, non-traditional instrumentation really came into view, which definitely helped set her upcoming albums apart even further, so small nitpicks aside, I'd still put this right up there in the B tier.
If we had a double king-size bed, we could move in it and I'd soon forget that what I am is what I am, cause I does what I does.
The Idler Wheel isn't the full title, but just to satisfy all you purists out there, hey, how's it going? At number 4, I have The Idler Wheel is wiser than the driver of the screw, and whipping cords will serve you more than the ropes will ever do. 2012 was a very tumultuous time in modern music, with the indie boom rivaling the heights of dubstep and dance, so with the new Fiona Apple project on the horizon, many people were left wondering how she'd fit into the conversation. And as always, she entered the chat by not giving a single fuck about tying her music to a certain sound. Popularity was always just a byproduct of her honesty and expression that she never seemed to want anyways, and who could really blame her? Meticulously chipping away turned into 7 years later, just long enough to shake off the fair weather fans and reduce her own hype intentionally. There was little in the way of promo via interviews or late-night TV performances like we'd seen in her past eras, this was a palate cleanser for Fiona, a rope swing extension to Extraordinary Machine with a keen ear for balance and pacing. In some ways, it feels like the forgotten child since it came out at a weird time and didn't seem to attract as much conversation, but the songwriting is downright spellbinding, and the sheer amount of variety that they tucked into the instrumentation makes LP4 even more rewarding. Whether it's the crushing Valentine getting you in your own head, making you feel your own heartbeat, to Left Alone with its unnerving key-driven tension, or the often buzzed-about Hot Knife that saw manic layered vocals paired with booming kettle drums to insanely satisfying, sexually charged results, this is a fantastic listen. This is extremely compelling material with plenty of dynamite switch, mic drop moments, and I know the music aficionados already know and adore the Idler Wheel, but I'm not so sure the general public recognizes the diamond that this is. It's high-class A-tier material, not quite S-tier, but fuck is it close, and I'm gonna cut myself off there before I change my mind again.
I don't go to sleep till dream. You got your head in the closet and I don't go to see.
Tidal is everything a debut album should be. Unique, palatable, buzzworthy, and in Fiona Apple's case, riveting. She's fantastic if not melodramatic, cold-shouldered, but never disengaged emotionally. We get a slice of this girl who feels broken but isn't, wants love but can't accept it, and it's one of the most refreshing expressions of honesty from a young artist ever. Tidal to some degree is a listen when you're in a certain type of mood or state of mind record for me, which is why it's down lower than I'd realistically like for it to go, but I know myself, and my brutal honesty is that I listen to it less than the 2 records appearing above it, and let me tell you, this top 3 is closer than close. I am sweating bullets already. Maybe the highest highs overshadow the slightly more average tunes, and by average, I mean average by Fiona's standards, since we all know they still run laps around your typical singer-songwriter fodder. After all, this is home to the breakout single Criminal, that I still think is one of the best unlikely hits ever, as well as the slow dance with Temptation Shadow Boxer, and the raucous, self-assured Diamond Sleep to Dream. To that degree, maybe Tidal is a tad front-loaded in the sense that the single stands so tall, but then again, a whopping 6 out of 10 tracks were greenlit as singles, so that's not even really fair. You can still dream aloud to the other tracks too, as her potent writing and seamless diversions flow like a distant river. Love goes out to the wide-ranging performances this debut offers, from the jazzy lounge-inspired pianos to the culling wavy guitars and the isolated ambience of her loneliness that's manifested by some of the album's best cuts, like Pale September and SULLEN Girl, which has an especially tragic backstory from Fiona's childhood. Don't feel bad if you've never heard the full album. There's so many classic records out there, you'll likely never get to all of them, but I would absolutely give this a glowing recommendation. In fact, start with Criminal, jump to The First Taste, and then over to Carrion, because you need to hear all of that song in full because that guitar finale is everything. S tier for Tidal, case closed.
And I know none of this will matter in the long run, but I know a sound is still a sound around no one.
A serious heads up, listen with caution label on top of Fetch the Bolt Cutters. This album goes there, and I'm talking seriously heavy topics like assault, manipulation, and various forms of trauma and abuse. This is not a casual listen, not that any of her records should be listened to passively, but Fiona's truth is impossible to ignore on album 5. 8 years passed from the Idler Wheel to Bolt Cutters, but if you'll forgive me, I need to momentarily sound like a squawking, repeating parrot here. Fiona Apple albums are always worth the wait. First off, I love that Fiona guides us in with a sweeping piano number, I Want You to Love Me. Pianos are familiar, we know the sting of Fiona unraveling some unrequited love, which feels like a touch of sunshine in the dark, but what about the other side of the coin? The fact that she appears to be singing to her own mind, implying that self-hatred is easier than self-love. That's where shit gets twisted, and you realize you're not walking down the same windy sidewalks you've traversed through the decades with Fiona Apple, although we do take a stroll on the blazing childhood trauma expose Shamika, which just so happens to be one of her best songs of all time. Did you hear those roaring pianos? But I digress. What I'm getting at is that the choice to open the album with a more expected sound, only to slowly slide off yourself into eclectic, weird madness is the type of delivery mechanism you just want to break into a slow clap for. You might not even notice your first few listens, but it gets more challenging as Fiona indicates loud and clear that she won't be treated like a doormat, she has a voice, and the scars tethered to the stories. Bolt Cutters was the unchainer of the training wheels that idler wheels set into motion. You could see the more experimental drum arrangements building on the less conventional song structures, so it's only natural that our next LP comes out of the cocoon swinging for a fence we haven't heard before. A heavily percussive, brutal, but light on its feet kind of anger that strikes with the persistence of a mama wolf trying to protect her entire pack. If we weigh it out on the tier list, I gotta go with S all the way. It rarely, if ever, gives me anything critical to say about it, and some of the best songs like Heavy Balloon I feel helped me a lot personally, and I love that ominous sparse production, which is so spine-tingling. I'd also throw highest of praise on the sarcastic double standard breaker rack of his, the existential bop Cosmonauts, along with two very rough but necessary heartbreaking masterpieces, Newspaper and For Her.
Please forgive me for my distance. The shame is manifest in my resistance to your love, to your love.
My heart overflows for the Queen of the Throne, as my number one pick pretty easily goes to her sophomore album, Win the Pawn. Although she's definitely put up some fierce competition. There's nothing quite like this. It's a dark, piano-led cautionary tale that's fueled by feminism and a deep desire to follow the art, not the label. The album's full name was both a poem and a record setter for having the longest title of all time, a record that has since been broken, but she was in the books at the time of its release in 1999. Naturally, we abbreviate this one to Win the Pawn, but imagine somebody asks, what's your favorite Fiona Apple record? And you just instantly spout out, when the pawn hits the conflicts, he thinks like a king, what he knows throws the blows. When he goes to the fight and he'll win the whole thing. Before he enters the ring, there's no body to batter when your mind is your might. So when you go solo, you hold your own hand. And remember that the depth is the greatest of heights, and if you know where you stand, then you know where to land, and if you fall, it won't matter because you'll know that you're right. Minds weren't just blown by the title, it was the body of work she constructed that not only avoided the sophomore slump, it straight up annihilated the idea of it, since I feel that Win the Pawn is a perfect record that only improved on what she had done 3 years prior. Having the coexistent ability to house both unbridled anger and soothing melodies under the same umbrella pretty much spearheaded the whole musical genius praise I broke out in the intro, but it's seriously flawless material to bridge the gap between different stages of life and broken relationships. It's a mood album without the seasonal or personal limitations your go-to mood album might have, due to this one having such a wide range of romantic adjacent allegories she's exploring. Nuanced piano chords stab straight through to the heart, with Fiona's sultry voice never failing to fixate your attention on every word she sings. There's so much life in the jazzy instrumentation, with perfect little guitar passages complementing those pianos, which in turn complement Fiona and the entire backing band. Win the Pawn also boasts some iconic singles. I mean, Fast as You Can, a spry lightning bolt warning call, Limp, a tempo-shattering firestorm, and Paper Bag. That might just be the best damn song of the trio. Fiona kills the love-drunk warrior look, and the way the instruments expertly highlight the hope and disappointment she's feeling, it's kind of a marvelous masterpiece. Most casual fans know all of those, but I have to recommend even more because there's so many diamonds just hiding in plain view. To Your Love, for example. That's a cinematic jazz rock Bond theme that isn't actually a Bond theme if I've ever heard one, or A Mistake, which is a beautifully warped expression of self-loathing with a tight guitar solo. This is absolutely your go-to if you're looking for an entry point to Fiona Apple's discography, and it's an obvious S-tier placement. You might think you know what you're getting into, as the wonderfully expressive artistry of On the Bound belts out as the opener, but by the end of track 10, oh, I know you'll know. Wait, we're not quite done. All 5 of the albums have been ranked, but now it's time for my top 10 Fiona Apple songs. Heads up, this is gonna be super brief, so don't blink, you might miss it. Oh, and check the description down below to see the honorable mentions that didn't quite make it. Number 10 is Left Alone. I love these stabby pianos and the overall cadences that this song takes on. At number 9, I put Carrion off of Tidal. This is a slow burn turned into a grand finale. I love that guitar outro. At number 8, I have Oh Sailor, which is a fancy sounding ballad, again my first Fiona Apple song. At number 7, I put Sleep to Dream, which is a very aggressive but grounded single of hers. At number 6, we have Newspaper. This is one where you can feel Fiona's fear for another woman who may be getting abused, and it's just so palpable and effective. I have A Mistake at number 5. The song just sounds so effortlessly cool. I love every little detail that goes into it. At number 4, I have a song named after me, and I realize that it's not positive that she's talking about Jonathan here, but hey, my ego's gonna take this one. And also, tell me that this doesn't remind you of the Freaky Fred music from Courage the Cowardly Dog. Number 3, The First Taste. This is an extremely danceable, rhythmic sensation that just washes over the ears. There's so many eclectic sounds. At number 2, we have Shamika. This is Fiona finally addressing more of her childhood, and I think where some of her initial fears of other women came from, all over these amazing racing pianos. And at number 1, I have The Way Things Are as my favorite Fiona Apple song. I'm not sure if anybody else in the world agrees with me on that, but it's a feeling unlike anything else. I love the strings, the keys, the strutting guitars, the illustrious vocals. The overall hook to the song is always on point, and also there's some really incredible drums from Matt Chamberlain. Let me know in the comment section down below, what did you think of my ranking of my top 10? Did you like the way that I formatted this video? Any and all feedback is appreciated. Please hit that like button, share it out with a Fiona Apple fan. If you want to see me review Fetch the Bolt Cutters, then tap the card on screen here, or tap here for another episode of Ranked. All of my socials can be found in the description, and I'll be back soon for more on ARTV.